metaverse space is probably everybody's aware of, but no one really knows how to tackle that, right? No one is willing to invest in a metaverse from their perspective, in a single metaverse. So they're all looking at metaverse infrastructure. Like, how can I enhance my customer experience? But of course, you know, if you look at, for example, Spatialport is a company we're excited about, but of course we see still challenges. You know, it's easy to put your product in a metaverse and show it to potential customers. But how do you keep them engaged, right? How do you actually go about and say, look, you see my shoes here, you can look them online, but how do you bring people back into that metaverse and give them that attention, right? There's no point of launching a collection in the metaverse if you don't have users. So they looked at it from a bit of a different angle, and they said, okay, where do you use your Nike shoes? Where do you use your watch or your, I don't know, fancy clothes? It has a certain environment. So they bring these pieces in a certain environment and let people deal with it and try it out in that specific environment rather than just putting them on a shelf and demonstrating that. And that's what, for example, these consumer brands find interesting, because they always have a problem of creating experiences in shops. And now this is probably what is an interesting angle to tackle, but you still have the problem how to get people in there and stay in there, right? Now we've seen a lot of metaverses who sold land and had users, but the activity of the users is still quite low. I also think it's kind of, you know, a piece of having VR or like the whole sort of immersive technology component not yet been fully reflected in our day-to-day lives. Grid is a really cool company, so Paris Hilton and many others just invested in that company. She is basically building a no-code gaming platform where you can build a game. A lot of schools are using it in Pakistan and India and many other places. And the idea here is really of how do you use games for more than just gaming, right? How do you use game for education, for, you know, edtech and many other different plays. And over the last months, you had, I think, a 35,000% growth in terms of games being created. Over 50,000 game creators now on the platform who are using that for all sorts of different ideas, right? So the idea is really of like thinking through how to bring that to masses and think outside of the box of the early crypto adopters of how can we use that from a Web3 angle of potentially compensating to be learning on the platform or using other people's assets to build a game on it and you get rental fees, right? There's different ways of monetizing that, and she has figured it out, at least of now. Metaschool, actually a company based here in Singapore. I don't know if you heard of Fatima and what she's building. It's a really cool one, because we as a fund, we have a big problem of talent, right? Especially tech talent. So a lot of companies asking us, hey, where do we get great blockchain developers? Where do we get smart contract developers? And you know, it's hard, right? You can obviously pay someone a big chunk of money to search for you, and you can go out and message people on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. But she built a creator community for developers, and she onboarded over 100,000 people now. I think it's one of the biggest Web3 developer communities in the world right now. And she helps them and teaches them getting into the space. And we want to facilitate that back to our portfolio companies and, of course, to other funds to help them source talents, right? So I think if you're looking for talent, it's probably worth chatting with Metaschool in order to really secure an interesting talent pipeline. ASM, I want to bring this up specifically because with ChatGPT and AI becoming extremely hot right now, everybody is looking at that. A lot of companies in the crypto space are using that technology. They're a company based out of New Zealand. No one heard of them for a long time. Then they raised the biggest seed round in New Zealand history. Don't get too excited, it's still New Zealand. But now they raised over $100 million and really trying to bring AI to NFTs, right? How can you train NFTs moving forward and make them a lot more sophisticated, not just in games, but in a lot of different areas where NFTs can be used, right? It could be in shopping, it could be in e-commerce, it could be in finance, where you can actually train them on a blockchain and, you know, improve the experience and the product in itself. Luna Crush, I don't know, maybe some of you guys use it. It's a quite popular platform in the space. And they also realized, okay, first we were only focusing on bringing sentiment from platforms about all sorts of different cryptocurrencies, right? So instead of you going to Discord, Twitter, all these different platforms, you go here and you get a social scoring. They pull 10 million social media posts per day, and then give you sort of a social scoring. But now they also realized, I want to broaden my user base. I want to go into stocks, right, outside of the Web2 space, Web3 space, and really bring those Web2 users in. But the problem here is, again, monetization, right? So how do you monetize that? Ads is an interesting product, but if you give your customers an ad-free platform for free, it's very hard to convert them back and accept either a payment or ads, right? So like they're figuring out how can we enable on-chain trading, transactions on the platform, because people are already there. There's 500,000 monthly active users on that platform in this market who are using that to identify, explore. A lot of exchanges using it from a B2B perspective. So like think through of how you monetize your platform early on, because if you give away for free just to scale, it's always difficult to get them to pay for stuff once they realize the luxury of having a freemium product. Magna just got a big hype. They raised 50 million from Tiger Global a couple of months ago, and they are enabling the problem a lot of investors have, right? Look at about Animoca Brands, for example, or like many other sort of more crypto funds who invest in a lot of different token assets. Like imagine they all have different unlocks, they have different vesting periods, they're on different chains, and if you have over 200-300 investments and some of the tokens haven't even TGE'd yet because of the market, it's very difficult to just miss that you should have received tokens which you could have sold or could have done stuff with them, staked them, and so on and so forth. And on average, like funds, like bigger funds who have a lot of investments, they just lose 40% of the token just by not figuring out where they are and when they should be unlocked and what chain they are. They're tackling that issue of building a token management platform, kind of like a Carta for Web3. I know the space is congested and a lot of people trying to do that, but I think they have an interesting head start and also obviously quite a bit of capital to figure it out. We just onboarded and tried it out. It definitely helps because before we were using spreadsheets, to be honest, and like Airtable and things like this, as probably many other funds know what I'm talking about, or even startups, of sort of managing all of our token distribution or token investments. I think that should really solve a big pain point in the industry. Clink is a very interesting one. I know that a lot of CeFi products are challenging right now. The whole Celsius idea is obviously compromised and users lost trust in a sense. But they're offering 3 to 5% yield, and the idea is really, okay, how can we decrease customer acquisition costs, right? A lot of companies have the problem that it's not cheap to acquire customers in Web3. It's actually quite expensive because you're fighting with a small niche of users. And they said, okay, if we can offer basically some sort of reward system, right? It's kind of like a lottery in a sense. Everybody likes that. So if you deposit money, you get lottery tickets, and that keeps people depositing on the platform, coming back, and then a referral system kind of underlines that, right? So I think what we've seen right now in this market is that a lot of people think outside of the box. It's not just paid marketing anymore. It's not just SEO anymore. It's not just referral systems. It's like, how do we use proper in-game or like in-product mechanics to drive adoption and combine this obviously with a lot of trust and stable yields, and don't promise on the upside anymore. That just simply doesn't work. The fear index is quite large. So a lot of challenges as we kind of figured out in this market, and I don't need to go through all of them, I think. But we have a high barrier of entry into the space right now. I think a lot of people became a lot more cautious, both investors and users. But I'm very excited, to be honest, that we still see stronger founders than ever in the market. We see over 400 or 500 companies a month coming through a funnel, and they're really building awesome stuff. I think it also got a lot more reasonable in terms of terms for fundraising, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? A lot of founders come to us and they tell us, oh, we want to raise at the highest price, which I understand to an extent. But the problem is there comes a lot of pressure with that. If you're not able to sustain that, and probably from a Series A perspective, you need to show metrics, you need to show numbers, and if you're not able to do that, you're facing down rounds or challenges, raising further capital. So I think having a more realistic approach is probably not a bad idea. And I think that's what kind of happening in the market. A lot of companies came back to us, okay, we're raising at a lower amount now, or we're doing equity raises because token is not really exciting for a lot of people, or at least like a token warrant. So the industry changed quite significantly, right? And I'm obviously going to sound very optimistic with where I am. I'm extremely excited about the space, but there are definitely challenges, right? A lot of companies are struggling to raise further funding. They burned through too much cash. There's a lot of restructuring happening in different portfolios where people are really thinking, how can I reduce burn and keep the company alive? And really think through that if you're a founder of how can you be sustainable in this market and at least have, I would say, between 12 to 18 month runway if you're building at the moment and you're not profitable or generating revenue. So a lot of interesting solutions. We talked a little about today, building product before community, I think is one of the most important ones. When you build a product, talk to your customers, probably on a day-to-day basis almost. And I think even that should come from a CEO or CMO, whoever is part of that specific product team. Talk to your customers. You will realize a lot faster. I mean, once we invest in a company, we always tell them, talk to at least 50 customers in the next 2 weeks, and then tell us what they come back with. And that really helps to give them a better understanding of, okay, what features are they using, what are they excited about, what should they focus on, and then it gives them a better route to market. Treasury and economy management is what I just touched on a little bit. Obviously, from a safety perspective, it's extremely important to really nail that, to give customers the opportunity to be just positive of what you're doing. It's also important for the business to fully understand the financials, both as a DAO or as a sort of more equity-focused business. We looked at a lot of real-life utility cases where I'm speaking a lot with brands from all over the world. We're just really trying to understand how can we tackle that. We have a lot of Web2 LPs in our fund who specifically invest with us because they just want to understand what's in there, right? They only know exchanges, they know the financial aspect to it, but there's so many other use cases these companies are building, and that's why we have larger banks invested, telco providers. So there is a tension in the space, but like the utility is still sometimes not fully clear for outsiders, and that's why I think if we really build on these real-life utility and use cases, it's going to be more promising moving forward. Now, that was kind of high level what I wanted to chat about. I want to mention a couple of high level things at the end. I think it is interesting to see that, we looked a little bit on the data. Venture funding in Web3, sort of in the first year or like end of December until end of January 2023, was only $105 billion. $105 million. It was $1 billion in the same month a year ago, right? So it went down 10x in the space, and I think that's something you have to understand. A lot of funds are simply not fully deploying right now, and it is important to understand that how do you catch their attention, right? It's not simple in that sense, but I do think it's going to pick up. I do think it's going to be more exciting moving forward, and if you build a strong product, if you focus on the utility of the product and don't start a conversation with, my tokenomics, blah, 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 right? I think it's about the product first and it's about crypto second. And try to understand what is the customer really interested? How can you help support what they're doing? And I'm pretty sure you're going to have a smoother way forward on fundraising, but also going to market, right? Funding is not everything, it's a part of it. But I just, I'm just always excited of really digging deep with the founders and understanding what are the use cases we are doing? Like, how can we improve people's lives with your solution? And it could be across anything, right? Gaming improves people's life, NFT could improve people's life, and then we can figure out proper ways of going to market and monetizing these strategies. So yeah, happy to chat. I hope that gave you an interesting overview. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful early weekend.
Round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen, to Tobias with the Web3 startup strategist. So we'll be taking a short break from 1 p.m. all the way to 1:30. So hope to see you guys back here in 30 minutes with our next panel speaker, Erika, with the title Ways for Startup and Young Companies to Become Investors Ready.